It was harder to unmute myself than I thought it would be. Okay, hi. Thank you all for joining, and thank you very much for inviting Upnagard to join in today's health fair. So we're really excited to talk to you about sort of an immigrant perspective on family, peers, and dating, and what some of the attitudes are, and then what makes for healthy and unhealthy relationships. So let's get started. So we're going to spend a little bit of time today. We do have some polls. This is going to be interactive. Giving some time for you to think about, to identify what the messages are that you've received from family and friends about intimacy, about dating, and how it differs for gender, and then take a look at comparing how your peers and your family and your broader community, how they differ in what their values are around dating and what's appropriate and what's not, and what are the roles of men and women. And I'm sorry if I'm going to talk in gender binaries. It's not that I embrace like a strict male-female binary, but it's just often those are the messages that we are given. So if I just sort of focus on male-female, please, I don't mean to be exclusive or to in any way overlook anybody who is gender expansive. And so I apologize for that. But when we talk about gender socialization, unfortunately, the dominant culture does often break it down to that simple binary. And so we are going to look at those messages that have been propagated in our in our families and our communities. Also, there's a little bit of research on college students from immigrant families and attitudes around dating, and then looking at unhealthy and healthy relationships, and then want to share some resources on what students can do. So why don't we do this, since we're really fortunate that we can have a much more interactive group. Why don't I call on you one by one, if you don't mind, and just take a quick verbal poll one by one. If we could start out with Leslie in terms of what, if any, relationships you admire from characters in movie, television, people in the public sphere. If you could kind of identify a relationship you admire and what it is you admire about that relationship. So Leslie, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Sure. Well, I'm Mexican American and I live in California. So I live in a little town where more than 80% are Mexican Americans. So I think I grew up like watching novelas. So I think that's something that, the typical novela, it's like the woman doesn't work, they don't really have a career, they do whatever the husband says. So I think like I grew up with that idea, like, that was like the idea that I was gonna marry someone and I was gonna be like a household.
And was there a particular, does any one relationship stand out, or were there just similar patterns in many other relationships? And if so, what were those what was it about those relationships that you admired? What were some of the qualities of the relationship?
Sorry. I think because they don't really show like sorry, like they have like issues, like they don't really show the reality. So they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna marry someone, I'm gonna live happily after. So I think that was like my ideal relationship. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I mean they absolutely do have an impression, and I know there's at least one group that was working on a telenovela that was going to have domestic violence themes in it, because it's such an influential force. All right, so then Michael, if you want to name a relationship that you admire from celebrities, movies, television, politicians. Mike.
Are you referring to romantic relationships or friendships, or? I can't hear you now. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm on mute now. Yeah, romantic relationships.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm at a loss. I'm sorry, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry.
You know what? We can come back to you, Michael.
Yeah,
Not
come
a
back.
problem.
Okay, give me a
Not a
minute.
problem.
Okay, sorry.
Nope, you're fine. Jorge, if you want to go next.
Yes, hi everyone. Um, I kind of do relate with Leslie. I'm also Latino, and we always grew up with watching like telenovelas, but I think more as like a Disney baby. Like I was brought up watching a lot of Disney movies, and never did I imagine like the themes of like LGBTQ being a thing. Like I always thought like I would be with a woman and not like how I identify now. Like it was never an idea that was put out there by that type of specific media. You know, the relationship between those princesses and the prince is like they have a confrontation, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like the telenovelas, like, oh, everything is happily ever after, you know? My mom is a single mom and she thought she was living a happily ever after with my father, but she always goes back and says, like, well, you know, it's not always like that, you know? But, and she always used to say, like, well, when you grow up, you'll understand. So it's like, whoa, like that whole like 360 shift from like getting those nice ideas to now it's like, oh, reality.
Yeah, my daughter caught on really quickly that I was changing the ends of the, Disney stories that I'd read her. And, instead of saying they lived happily ever after, I'd always say, and they had good days and bad days, hard days and fun days, did their best to love each other and be kind. And finally she caught on. She goes, that's not what it is. But it's just
I think you have to be realistic in a way. And I think that's perfect, you know, like if we're reading these stories, like that's our own interpretation as well. Like they're gonna remember what you say.
yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so thank you, Jorge. Daniel, would you like to introduce yourself and share a relationship that you admire?
Sure. So I'm Daniel Matamoros, pronounce he, him, his. This might sound weird, but I guess in the media, one of my favorite relationships that I guess I do admire is the one from the Addams family.
Oh,
So
yeah,
Gomez and Morticia. And the thing
yes.
about it, I mean, like Gomez just like adores her and thinks she's like the greatest thing in the world, which is wonderful. But it's not just like this like hopeless romantic kind of love. I mean, they're there for one another. They get through like struggles such as like homelessness and like losing everything. And there's always this like I don't know, like hopefulness associated with it that like it doesn't matter what's going on around us, like everything could be on fire, and oftentimes everything is on fire. We'll still make it through, right? And it's just finding in each other that kind of support and care and uh, I don't know. I've always really appreciated, and I don't think there's any other better relationship.
Yeah, no, I've have heard of that one before. It is, there's absolutely something very special about that relationship. Thank you, Daniel. Luis, would you like to introduce yourself and share your you admire and why?
Hi, my name is Luis. My pronouns are he, him, his. One of the, I guess, celebrity relationship that I admire would be Shakira and Gerard Piqué's. I think like they're not legally married, but they're essentially married, and they talk about how that they don't really need that, but they're very like respectful of each other and their children. Um, yeah, like they've been together for like I think about 11 years now, and like they talk about how like they treat their children as equals, when especially when they're talking to them, and like educating them from an early age, and just um promoting them to be like agents of change, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. That makes absolute total sense. Thank you. The next, Nadia, would you like to introduce yourself and share a relationship you admire and why?
Hi, yeah. So my name is Nadia. I'm here based in New Jersey. So I guess growing up, my father always encouraged me to go to school and be independent. So I guess I have two relationships. The first relationship would be like Beyonce and Jay-Z, and I know that may be like really bizarre seeing like that, the scandal that they had recently. But that just speaks to the communication between couples, working things out. Not everything is perfect. And then the next one would be like Obama and Michelle, and like the respect that they have for each other.
It's wonderful. Thank you, and welcome. And then, okay, I'm losing place. Did we hear from Daniel? Okay, sorry. Is it Manasa?
It's Manasa.
Manasa.
Yeah. I was gonna say the Obamas as well. I think like just the way that they like speak to each other and also speak of each other is like so respectful, and like I think rather than just respect, like you can see a lot of like just love in the way that they treat each other. And I think obviously when it like comes to politicians, like there's an element of that that's for the cameras and for people to like see them in this way. But I think that in their private life as well, like the Obamas have been through a lot just as a couple, and like the support that Michelle gives Barack and like vice versa as well, I think is like really, really awesome. And I don't know that I see that in like a lot of other couples that we see in the public eye.
No, I agree. I knew them before he became a state senator, or when he became a state senator, and she was very lovely and admiring of him even then. And so it was, yeah, I think a lot of what we see is real, it definitely shines through. Wonderful. Michael,
Yes.
do you feel?
Yes, I'm ready now. Yeah, sorry. Well, let me just say who I am just briefly. My name is Mike Bush. I'm 61, so I'm coming at this in a very different angle than the other people, I think. I'm also single, and I teach English as a second language. So my students come from outside the US. The movie that comes to mind right away, I guess, is Our Souls at Night with Robert Redford and Jane Fonda. I like Redford's movies. He's done a lot recently concerning relationships for older people. And of course, he's probably around 70 years old now. Our Souls at Night is a movie about a widow and a widower, and they get together after they've lost their spouse. I think what stands out for me with the movie is the loyalty, commitment that they had to their partner, but they're also facing loss, and they're trying to work through that loss. I'm also a chaplain, and I'm working towards a Master of Divinity. So, like I said, I'm older, so I'm looking at this from a very different perspective, I think, than someone who's in their 20s. So
That's great. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And Abha, if you would like to introduce yourself, and then if there's a relationship out there that you admire and why.
Yeah, she's muted.
All right, Abha might have stepped away. This is Professor Abha Rai from Loyola School of Social Work, and she is a social work researcher who actually has worked with my organization, Apnagar, and has done some really interesting work on culture and domestic violence and culturally informed domestic violence screening and intervention. So Abha is a new colleague for you all at Loyola. All right, I'm going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so this is just a really simple definition of intimacy. We're going to be talking about intimacy, and so that we're all on the same page. What I'm defining it as here is when two or more people are engaged in sharing of space, personal information or images, bodily contact, any type of physical, verbal, or digital sexual behavior. So phone sex, et cetera, sharing stories, somebody with whom you share an intimacy, you share information. An intimate moment between two people could be when you are sharing information that you know, you don't share with everybody, and then you know there's a little bit of vulnerability there. And just so you know, Dr. Rai just apologized, her screen was frozen, but she is very much here. And so so does this make sense for folks in terms of a definition of a working definition of intimacy? Okay, so now, in the chat, if you could share with us, think about what your family, think of the messages from your family in terms of how they've commented on their own behavior or the behavior of men in the family or others outside the family. What have they said about how a man should behave in an intimate relationship? And let me see, here's the chat. Okay. Yeah. Sacrificial love. Okay. Okay. So, Daniel, that's in terms of sort of like putting others before them, you know, out of love. Is that okay? Respectful towards their spouse or partner. A man should be respectful towards their spouse or their partner. Jorge. Great. Any other, think of any other messages, you know, and it doesn't even have to be explicit. It might be you got a message because of the way that your parents respond or your family responded to others and to other relationships. To be a provider, to be romantic. Okay. So, you know, these are some of the things, strong head of household, absolutely. Very often that's a lot of the burden that is placed on men in relationships. If it's, you know, an ongoing domestic relationship, having to be the provider, or even sometimes in dating, sometimes the expectation is that if it's a heterosexual couple that the man or the male is supposed to pay. Be in control, respectful, careful, okay, okay. Sometimes dominant and control, to dominate and to control, careful, watch for those trying to have a good time. Okay, all right. So then let's go on to the next. Again, in the chat, what has your family said about how a woman should behave in a relationship? And again, implicit or explicit messages you've gotten from family in terms of how a woman should behave when she's in a relationship. Proper yet independent, submissive, then being willing to compromise. Yeah, we saw a lot about having to compromise in the recent Netflix Indian Matchmaker. We heard her saying to the women, but not the men as much. Yep, having to be docile. Respectful, faithful, care for the family, put her family first. Yep. So another type of sacrificial love, yes. And we have also seen this in studies showing that when it comes to perpetuating, inculcating culture, that it's often left to the female head of household to do that more than the male head of household. So absolutely keeping up the traditions, definitely sacrificial, preparing for motherhood, taking care of domestic or home tasks. Okay, allowed to show more emotion, a broader range of emotions than our men in relationships. That's right. How often have we seen a male, you know, father figure cry, etc., or just say, I'm really sad? Absolutely, absolutely. So there are some different expectations. All right, now think more to your friends and your peers. Think about the messages you got in your classrooms. Think about the messages you got from friends. Think about the things that your friends admire or you know, say negative things about, you know, which both, you know, give messages about what's okay and not okay in relationships. What do they say about how women should behave in relationships? Your friends and your peers. You know, when you hear your friends now, or when you were in high school, when you heard them talking about other relationships, when you heard them talking about women who were in relationships, were there things that they laughed at? Were there things that they admired? Are there relationships, okay, to be independent, free, and liberal? Flirty towards a significant other? A little picante, why not? Okay. Male should be catering to her needs, having clear communication. So those things, both where her needs are catered to, and that sort of having a clear communication. Okay. I'll take another couple seconds, see if anybody has anything else, then we'll move on to the next slide. All right. So for the messages that your friends, your peers have given you about how men should behave in relationships, what are the messages that you heard in terms of anything that your peers, your classmates laughed at or admired about men, and how men should behave as boyfriends, partners, husbands? You know, the flip side, you know, would be that, you know, what Jorge said also applies here, that, you know, maybe you know, there's a message that men need to cater to, if it's in a heterosexual pairing, their female partner's needs. What are some of the other things? Take the lead, be proactive, and endure the chase. Okay, now that's really something, that's saying something there. Right, isn't there often a sense of pursuit? And what are the messages that we give society about men being persistent in pursuing a relationship? And what does that mean for how they hear the word no? You know, it's really, there's a lot to unpack there. It's a, you know, it's a really important point. I mean, you're all bringing up great points, but it's really interesting if the impetus or the onus is on the male in a relationship to be the more forward one, to pursue, to chase. Implicitly, that's kind of saying that, you know, does it really encourage them to hear and respect no from someone? You know, that's a really, really interesting point. All right, thank you. All right, so just again, and we can even just open it up verbally if folks want to mention, think about what, you know, what the differences are. What did you notice in terms of the differences between familial messages and peer messages? Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to say something in terms of comparing what messages we've gotten from family, what we've gotten from peers.
I think, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the thing that comes up over and over for me is emotions, showing emotion. I mentioned about being in control, but what I meant by that was being in control of your own emotions. And that comes from both the family and from friends. As a chaplain, I'm more emotional than most men. And what I'm finding now is that really kind of scares other people when I become emotional. These are often in situations that are pretty bad to begin with, you know, a serious illness or impending death, that kind of thing. But even at church, I get choked up once in a while. That didn't happen until a few years ago. And that's been kind of a change in my personality from when I was younger. When I was younger, I was far more stoic. And I grew up in a blue collar neighborhood where it wasn't cool to be, you know, to show that you had emotion. You had to be in control at all times. So, yeah. But I find even now with my older friends that they're uncomfortable when they see a man become emotional. And the Redford movies, actually, in a couple of them, he shows emotion in his movies. I recommend them too.
Which is wonderful because it gives message to men of his generation and younger that it's okay, which,
Yes.
you know, it's very, it can be very influential.
Yeah.
So others of you, what did you notice? Did you see differences between what your friend Jorge, would you?
Yes. So like I had said, my mom is a divorced mother, and she's raised my sister and I like so much different than like a regular family, either online is. And like I just have to say, like, she's such a badass. Like I've had several conversations with her of how she's been brought up, and she's just like the total opposite of like she never conformed to like what her father said or what a perfect relationship was. And I think that's very different than what a lot of other people see. My mom is very open with us,
Mm,
and even her friends. She knows a lot of women who are in domestic violence, and I just love how like she uplifts them. It's
mm.
something I got to see the other day when we were washing at the laundromat, and she got to speak with this lady whom I knew but didn't know was going through that situation. And like the way my mom caters her conversations to different friendships, both male and female, is just so like powerful that I'm like, wow, I didn't know I had this type of mom, you know? Like I see her provide everything for my sister and I, who's younger, and just always receives, like I've seen when they give her compliments, like, oh well, you've raised your kids well. And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess. I mean, I've seen that.
Yeah,
But yeah, she's so different than like what society puts out there. And I've always asked her, like, why are you like that? Like you never conform to that. It's so easy. Especially since she's like a person of like big emotions. Like I would find it easy for her to like alter her personality, but it hasn't stopped her, which surprises me.
you know, it'd be wonderful, Jorge, if you would ask your mother at some point, you know, what she feels is different in what she says as opposed to what her friends' parents and family say in terms of.
Yes, and she lived in Mexico as well. So she saw a lot of like both how things are. Like she always tells stories too of like, oh, well, you're not like this, you're not like that. And even though like I recently just came out to her, that thing was a little bit different than what I expected. It wasn't too like, because she's always said, I'll always love you how you are, but that's always something too. I was like, she's still having a hard time. She's also very religious, which I think in society, that's something she does conform to. So it has like her ups and downs within her personality.
Sure. Sure, and that is the complexity of human beings, and you know, we are so not like Disney characters, and absolutely, and yeah, our parents surprise us in different ways. Yeah, no, but that's beautiful. Thank you for that. You know, I noticed that one of the things I noticed is that there was more of you know, the sort of like, enduring the chase, but also like, you know, being strong and independent. That was more of a message from peers rather than from family. Were there any other differences that you noticed in terms of, oh, here, and we also see, okay, yeah, okay, that's the same. Okay. Um, any other differences before we move on to the next slide that stuck out for you? And the whole point that one of the reasons we do this is at Upnagar, where I work, where we, you know, work with survivors of intimate partner violence and other forms of gender-based violence. When people ask, why does abuse occur? We take this, you know, socio-ecological approach where we say, look, there are various spheres of influence, you know, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And in order to examine the roots of violence, we have to look at the messages and what behaviors and policies and practices and environments permit abuse to occur. And so then we have to break that down to like, you know, what were we told as children? What are our communities promoting? What are our communities punishing? You know, what are our institutions allowing for and supporting, et cetera. So, you know, it's always just great to sort of and especially with all of you in university, it's such a fabulous time to reflect and learn more about yourself and compare yourself and learn about others. This is a great time for you to explore the messages that you have gotten from family, friends, community, etc. All right, let me see if I can go on to the next slide here. Okay, so what is the research telling us? Unfortunately, I have to minimize your faces here so I can see the slide. What are some of the research tells us about dating amongst first, second, and third generation immigrant college students? So in one, something that appeared in Marriage and Family Review, two researchers found that whether you were male or female, whether you were the eldest, middle, or youngest, and of course, how acculturated your family is, how much of the dominant culture's values and behaviors they've taken on. And that second generation immigrants, so, people who were born here to immigrant parents are generally seeking out others who are also bicultural, people who, have family from, who've recently come from another area of the world here to the United States. All right, we also know from another study that was done, this is, a larger study, 628 participants, of some mixed ethnicity. And they were comparing their relationship ideals or behaviors with their parents, the attitudes. And, it's not anything really surprising, but, they were all, as likely as one another to engage in intercultural relationships. So, just as likely as the other to date somebody from outside their ethnic group. But the Asian Asian American students perceived a greater discrepancy between, greater difference between their ideas around dating as compared to their parents. And also, that also applies for whether you are first or second or third generation. If you came over here, if your family came over recently, and your parents' attitudes towards dating are going to often be very different than the dominant cultures. And then for parents who maybe were themselves, were born here themselves or came over as children, their attitudes might be a little bit more lax and might be more sort of in keeping with the dominant culture, and in which they might even permit dating. For many of us, dating was forbidden, and this is one of the complexities that we have to deal with in working with immigrant and refugee survivors of gender-based violence. Is that there are many college students and high school students who can't tell their parents that they're in a dating relationship. And in fact, I've fielded 2 hotline calls from college women, both of them South Asian American, who wanted to get orders of protection against their parents because their parents found out that they, as college students, were in dating relationships. And the parents were so angry that they were afraid of their parents, and they wanted to know whether or not they should get an order of protection to order their parents to stay away from them because they were so afraid of their parents' retribution and punishment. So, okay, so now we have polls, and so this is where Mira is going to be able to help and bring on some polling for us. So 1 being very comfortable, 5 being, or from very comfortable to very uncomfortable. How comfortable would you be if your best friend said their intimate partner wants their email and their Insta password? Five, six, 7. Okay. All right. All right. So, okay. All right. So somewhat uncomfortable. That's what we are finding is that in one study, 33% of college students shared their password with their partner, and very often in those situations, it was an abusive relationship. So, you know, it is something to be concerned about if somebody has such a mistrust or such a need to control that they want, you know, to be able to look at your social media.
So I misunderstood it. I didn't see password. I was thinking they just wanted your address.
Oh, sure. No.
Okay, no, I would never give my password to anybody. You know?
Okay. All right. So you're all in the somewhat uncomfortable to very
Absolutely,
uncomfortable.
yeah, no.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right. No. Not a problem. All right. If we could go on then, Mira, to the next one. Thank you.
I couldn't
All
always
right.
get the full question in the box. So sometimes you may have to.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I don't have to switch. So how concerned would you be if a friend told you that their partner really wanted to have sex the other night, but your friend didn't want to? Their partner kept insisting, kept asking. So your friend ended up saying, okay. Okay. So what is emerging is that wearing down the resistance, even if it seems that consent is given, very often that isn't true consent. There is an emotional wearing down that can become very exhausting for the person who ends up appearing to give consent. It's not considered true consent. And this is a great discussion for you to have with your peers about what consent looks like. You know, what is truly consent? But this is something that would be considered really problematic because,
And I
you know,
think, sorry, Radhika, I wanted to also add that I think that it could also be related to, you know, what will happen if you don't give the consent. Like, are they going to break up
yes,
with you? Or
right,
are they going to, you know, slut shame you? What are they going to do? What will your
right.
friends find out? Are they going to like make a video or do something crazy, cheat on you? So I think that's also a big reason that I've heard for people to give consent, and you really don't have to, because that is, again, you know what Radhika was saying, that is not true consent because you're essentially coerced into giving your consent. So very important for you to consider.
Thank you. That's a great way of saying it. That is emotional coercion. Absolutely. So thank you, Mira. If we could go on to the third. All right. How concerned would you be if your roommate's partner made them change their outfit before they went out because their partner thought your roommate's clothes were too tight and they didn't want others to get thirsty looking at them when they went out? So, you know, sometimes this, you know, needs to be taken into context. Is this something that happens all the time? Or, you know, but when a partner has, you know, forces another partner, you know, to say or not say, to spend in a certain way or not spend, to what they can wear, whom they can go out with. These are patterns of control that we're concerned about because so often people are just thinking of teen dating violence or intimate partner violence as just the physical violence. But no, we step back and look at larger patterns of control and, you know, who's feeling that they have more say in the relationship, who is more afraid, who is much more limited, whose world is getting smaller. And so if it's, you know, if it's like, I hate that shirt, or, you know, you're wearing a t-shirt with a really offensive message, we're going out with my friends, can you please change? You know, that's one thing, but, you know, this sense of almost ownership over you and wanting to control how others look at you, that is something that we consider to be a warning sign of a highly controlling person. Okay, so thank you, Mira. If we could go on to the next. All right, how concerned would you be if you were in a study group and every time you meet the study group, your group member, one of the group members' partner keeps texting to find out if they're done yet, and then you find that they text this group member 20 to 40 times a day to check on them? right. Okay, so we know that there's, like, are you guys done yet? Are you guys done yet? We know that, there might be a friend, family member who's like, who might, text a few times, but this surveillance, this constantly wanting to check on you is another form of control that we consider to be a red flag in relationships. So it's something that we absolutely are concerned about. And there is a lot of this technological surveillance. Like, let me see who's been texting you. If they don't ask for your ID, for your password, maybe they're wanting to look at your information all the time, or they're having others keep an eye on you. Thank you. And then the next one, number 5. So, okay. How concerned would you be if your ex started texting you all the time, commenting about you on your friends' Insta accounts, about you, how much they miss you, and ask their friends who are in class with you to keep an eye on you and who you talk to? Okay, thank you. This is something that we are concerned about. This is stalking, and we hear about stalking a lot on campuses. And I've talked to deans who've had to confront abusive ex-partners or partners who come to campus and harass and follow students. I'll never forget being interviewed years ago when I first worked for Upnagar in the early 90s, and being interviewed by a Loyola college student who, at the end of the interview, broke into tears and told us that she wanted to do a story on domestic violence because her abusive ex-partner had been stalking her on campus. So we know this is coming to campus, that along with other things, they're very problematic, either ex or somebody whom you've said no to, who is an accepting no. Stalking is very much a highly controlling behavior that's very concerning, and is something that needs to be reported and addressed. So thank you for that. All right, so let me get through these. So, all right, so in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, when you hear, dating abuse, teen dating violence, gender-based violence, what are the things that you think about? What are the images or words or people that come to mind? Or what I'm sorry, what does it look like? What does gender-based violence or dating violence look like? Anybody wants to? Okay. So let me share with you. Okay, so, all right. So I realize that we're low on time. So let me just talk to you a little bit about the signs, what you can do, and how you can help somebody if you know somebody who's in an abusive relationship. So there's this wonderful resource, loveisrespect.org. Nearly half of, nearly half of dating college women report experiencing violent and abusive relationship behaviors. College students are often not equipped. Nobody's there saying these are resources, these are things you can do. So they're often feeling unprepared to identify what is an abusive relationships, and not knowing how to help somebody who's in an abusive relationship. And 1 in 3 college students has given a dating partner their computer, email, or password, and are more likely to experience digital dating abuse. That was the statistic I shared earlier. 1 in 6, at least, college women has been sexually abused in a dating relationship. And these have, if somebody is choosing to abuse another person, the person whom they're abusing, very often, this has lifelong repercussions. The person whom they're abusing is more likely to experience substance abuse, eating disorders, risky sexual behavior, and other domestic violence. And young women, if somebody is sexually abusing them or physically abusing them, they are much more likely to become pregnant and twice as likely to get an STD or an STI We definitely see that happening at a much higher rates of HIV and other types of STI transmission. Youth who've been victims of both dating and rape are much more likely to commit suicide or attempt suicide than those men and women who have not been abused. All right. So these are some of the controlling behaviors that college students have talked about. Telling them where to live, preventing them from seeing family and friends, actually physically hurting them or threatening to hurt them, or doing very frightening things like banging the wall right next to the person where the person isn't struck, but there's a very implicit message that I could very easily hurt you. Using technology to, slut shame, revenge porn, etc., or surveil, pressuring into having sex, forced substance use. These are some of, in a study on college dating abuse, these are some of the types or behaviors that were reported. Also, verbal abuse, and it is emotional abuse. If somebody says, "If you leave me, I will kill myself," that's an incredible emotional burden to put on somebody, and it's considered to be a very abusive behavior. We cannot be responsible for another person's choices. And so there is, I believe Mira can share this PowerPoint with you. Andrew, there is a YouTube story of a young man who was sexually assaulted as a college student. And then again, here's just another poster that you can always share in terms of listing the types of abuse. And then we want to show you images of Asian American and men from around the world who are stepping up. There's a Men Can Stop Rape campaign showing an Asian American man who addresses a peer who's sexually abusing. Here's a Muslim fraternity from Texas. They gathered at a demonstration to speak out against domestic violence. And here's a Southeast Asian group of men who are speaking up about gender-based violence. Here at Loyola, you've got the Line, you've got the Center for Student Assistance and Advocacy and the Wellness Center. Please know that there is such a thing as a confidential contact, I can't remember if it's confidential reporter. There is a designated person on campus whom you can confide in if there is any type of abuse you've experienced. And they are not, I'm sorry?
That's me.
Mira, oh, fabulous. Oh, wonderful. And so Mira, what is the title officially? Confidential reporter?
Or just confidential resources.
Confidential resource. So Mira is the confidential resource who does not have to report to the police or report this as a Title IX violation. And so that's a really important resource. Please remember, and please share this with your friends and roommates. And know that this is a fabulous resource that you have here on campus, the Wellness Center, the Center for Student Assistance and Advocacy, and the Line itself. Again, confidential phone line for students to receive information, and staff, by trained Wellness Center advocates. And then there's the Illinois Domestic Violence Hotline 24/7. They have access to a language bank with more than 140 different language interpreters on call. So an Upnagar, that is our 24-hour hotline. That's the phone line that rings into our shelter. People can also text or email Upnagar. And so especially now in COVID, with people being surveilled by the abusive person with whom they're living and sheltering in place, this is something that we are really concerned about. And these are some of the things that are steps in safety planning. If you know somebody who's in danger, or if you yourself are in danger, these are some of the things that you can think about in terms of planning for your safety. And these are some of the things you can do if you know somebody who's in an abusive relationship: listening and believing them, telling them they're not alone, that they have resources, offering to help them go to resources. And we all need to hold people in our peer groups accountable. Don't minimize or ignore their behaviors. And orders of protection free in the state of Illinois. It's important to be able to reach out and talk to family and friends. And here's some more information, some other resources on research on abuse amongst college students. So let me stop sharing. Oops. Sorry. I don't know why I'm getting another screen. All right, so that's 50 minutes. I'm happy to stay on, but I know that some of you have classes to go to, or you might have another session. I can stay on for a few minutes if anybody would like to, but thank you all very much. And thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it. And I believe this is recorded and can be shared. If you know anybody who missed the session and you want to share any of this with them, they can talk to you, Mira, or how can they get a hold of the recording?
So we're going to be putting this recording likely on our YouTube channel. So if there's any concerns around that, I know that there were some disclosures in the space around some personal vulnerabilities or personal comments. So please reach out to me if you do have any concerns about that, but that's where we'll put it. We'll be posting on how to access that on our Instagram. I do have to close the meeting. I can't let people to stay because I have to start another one. But I will send out the PowerPoint tomorrow to all attendees, which has all of the resources listed.
Thank you, Mira, and thank you, everybody. And if any of you would like Upnagar to come speak to your class or your group, please let us know. My information is on the first slide. Thank you so much, Mira.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.